Welcome to For You Radio, where the gospel's for the believer and the unbeliever alike. That's you. Gospel's for you. Jesus Christ is your Savior. Deal with it. That's it. It's done.
Deal with it.
I think that's what Jesus should have said on the cross instead of "it is finished." Deal with it. It is finished. Deal with it.
Okay.
I think that would have been better. And, that's me. I'm in the business of correcting God, apparently. That's terrible. I'm Craig D'Onofrio, pastor of St. James Lutheran Church. Yeah, that's dangerous stuff.
Yep. Yeah. I'm Troy Neer, pastor of St. Peter's Lutheran Church.
We're in the old Brooklyn neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio. You're in Shaker Heights.
Yeah, I should let you finish. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
We forgot the shtick. Okay.
We've got that dried pineapple that we're eating is making us a little goofy. I think we're on a sugar high from that. Yeah. It's crazy. Hey, we would love to have you come worship with us at St. James or St. Peter's. Come find out about Jesus. Also, go to 1517.org, our sponsors, and find out all about the resources that they have there, books, classes, videos, podcasts galore, all sorts of great stuff. 1517.org, conferences also. So check that out. Okay, Troy.
Yep.
If people wanted to email us.
Please do.
Okay. There you have it.
Oh, like where? For you radio at 1517.org, right?
Org.
Yes.
Org.
Yes, I'm right on that. Okay, yeah, please email. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear your questions, comments. Yeah.
There it is.
I really like the questions, as a matter of fact.
Questions are good.
And people just kind of say, what about this? And it's fun. So,
yeah. If you're selling stuff, you can send us your spam, but we won't even open it. So there's that. Anyway.
Okay.
We are continuing on as we are in the mode of being offended. And
I am still offended.
Troy is offensive in every way possible. And no.
Does my beard offend you?
It does offend me, actually. The fact you won't let me sit on your lap and tell you what I want for Christmas, that's really the offensive part.
Oh, my goodness. It just got weird. So, okay.
So last time we were talking a little bit about law and gospel and how God has every right to be offended by us. And yet we're offended by everyone and everything, it seems, in this 21st century of ours. And if you don't cater to me and my thoughts, I am offended and you are morally a terrible person. That's basically the way that it works now, right?
Yeah, I think pretty much, right?
Yeah.
That, as we said last time, that when I get to say I'm offended, very often that means I get to say I'm taking the moral high ground.
Yeah.
Now, again, we have a contrast there versus those times when there is a genuine offense, and we do need to know how to deal with that properly. But this is a little bit different than just being able to shout on the internet that you've offended me.
Right. And this is something, that I just kind of want to bring up. This is an aside in a lot of ways. When we're on the internet, when we're on social media in particular, we are dealing with other actual human beings, not little electronic impulses that irritate me or not or whatever. And I think a lot of people get all indignant and offended, and it's a game for them. But they don't realize that when they actually go after someone, sometimes it has serious consequences. People lose their livelihood.
Well,
just because you got a bee under your saddle and I don't appreciate the way that person comes off. And instead of doing like we read about in Isaiah 1:18 last time, where the Lord says, "Come, let us reason together," that there is no more reasoning together. There is no more, hey, what did you mean by that? Is there something that maybe I need to understand here that I'm not catching? Instead, it's just, you need to shut up and never speak again. And that's the way that it is. And not only that, you don't deserve to have a livelihood or a job or anything else. You should be ruined for eternity and just go climb under a rock and die. That's kind of the attitude that comes out.
To that, with social media, that is the thing that, like you said, it just comes out so much. And the word I would apply to that is depersonalization.
Yes.
That we are forgetting, like you said, that there are actual people in this, and we typically wouldn't speak to them face to face in that way, but somehow the introduction of a computer screen between me and then you depersonalize that to the point where we can feel free to attack. We are free to treat people as though they are subhuman. And honestly, this is one of the reasons I just divorced myself from all social media. I just got off it all because, one, I was tired of that happening to me, and two, I started noticing that I was doing that to other people. That my patience with certain people would just wear thin very quickly because I couldn't stand that social media anymore.
Right. Yeah, and there are times where I take a break from it because of that. Yeah. But if you follow me on Facebook, you'll see that I believe that Facebook is mainly for posting stupid pictures of my dogs and goofy jokes.
That's wonderful.
Which still offend people. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
People are still offended by the most benign of things out there. And I found this is one of the things also. When someone is deeply offended by something that you post that's utterly benign, and they resort to name calling or something like that, I find that when I just simply say, well, that's hurtful, they usually get pulled up pretty short by something that simple where it's like, you're being hurt. That's just hurtful. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't even need to really call you out. It's like, well, that's just mean-spirited.
You know, you just got to
leave it there.
It strikes me as we've got two different approaches to offense. One might be what we call an imagined offense or an overblown offense.
Yes.
To where, again, that moral outrage that you have said something that I think could be offensive to somebody else or might be offensive to me or something like that. And it just kind of blows up into this almost nuclear option. But the other approach that we got to take is entirely different. Is when there is genuine, sincere offense. When we have sincerely offended against someone else, or someone else has sincerely sinned against us.
Right.
Not sincerely, but actually sinned.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Real life.
Grammar. Thank you. I can use it. I speak English. Yeah, and there's two different approaches. And by the way, I think we find both of those approaches in a certain chapter of the Bible, Matthew 18, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, I
was totally trying to set up a segue here.
I know. But this works along with what you were touching on. Not too long ago, someone posted a meme that was, in someone's opinion, offensive toward Italian Americans, and they included me in on it. And it's like, isn't this outrageous? And I said, I think it's hilarious. We really got to learn to laugh at ourselves a little more, folks. Not take everything so serious. Life is too ridiculous to take so serious all the time.
Okay, since we're at it, then,
yeah.
my favorite Italian joke.
Okay,
how do you keep an Italian from talking?
How?
You tie up his hands.
I'm offended. It's true. I'm in here waving my arms. You watch my sermons online, I'm about ready to take off.
That joke was told to me first by an Italian. I just want to let you know that it was told to me by an Italian person, a person of Italian descent anyway.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Yes.
But regardless, it's like, gosh, come on, folks. Let's not.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be offended because someone said you're fat and ugly. I mean, that's offensive. But it's another thing because someone said something that could be perceived as off about someone else, and that person over there that it's about is laughing, thinking that it's hysterical, but you get all wound up, and that person needs to be canceled, Okay, Matthew 18.
Oh, wait. Since I poked in front of you, me being of German descent.
Nah, the list is too long and distinguished to even get started.
I was going to say, did you hear the one about the Germans?
No.
Of course not, because we have no sense of humor.
That's right. I'm married to a German girl.
There is no joke about Germany.
I am married to a German girl who's possibly the most jolly person you'll ever meet in your life. And she doesn't fit. That's just the mold.
Anyway.
She's Italian now. She's got an Italian name, so she's happy.
So this what we just offered an attempt to do there is give someone a reason to say, that's really offensive. I'm offended on behalf of all Germans. I'm offended on behalf of all Italians.
Yeah, go ahead, knock yourself out, whatever.
Well,
I'm not offended.
If we do that, what portion of the book of Matthew, chapter 18, can we turn towards?
I would say 18 would be a really great place to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's this parable in that I know we probably dealt with this way back when we did our series on parables.
But maybe not in this way.
Yeah, but by the way, so go back and listen to that. It was a fun little series on parables, and we learned a lot. But it begins with Peter coming up to Jesus and saying, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me, and I should forgive him? as many as 7 times.
That's generous.
Peter thinks he's being generous.
Yeah.
And Jesus says that peculiar thing, truly, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. And he launches into a story. Let me just recap the story. And can I do that?
Yes.
Or do you want to read it?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so the recap of the story.
I just want to point out that's 490 times.
Yeah.
Okay, just so you know.
Well, 70 times 7.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we got some Greek grammar thing going on there, but okay.
Although
way.
it could be 77s, so would that be 7 to the 70th power?
Anyway,
I'm not sure.
It's a lot of sins, and more than Peter thinks is the point.
Right.
And Jesus tells the parable of the unmerciful servant. And here it is basically. A king settles account with his servants. He finds one particular servant who owes him approximately $4 gajillion.
That's on the low end, yeah.
It's an unreasonable debt. It is the size of the national debt that this guy owes his king.
Now, this was written in a time when $1 trillion was actually a large number, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Just so, put that in perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Back, not unlike today where it's not
That's
real
chump
money.
change now.
Yeah, exactly. And so he orders, the king orders this servant to be sold, as the king could do. He's also going to sell his wife and his children and all his property, and he's going to take all of that and say, okay, that's all I can get out of this debt. And the servant falls down before the king, saying this, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And the king, the master, indeed does have patience. He has pity on him, and he forgives him. And not just releases him, but he forgives his debt. Says, you know what? That debt's gone. It's erased. Now, what happens to that servant then is he goes out and he finds one of his fellow servants. Maybe it's a servant underneath of him. Maybe it's just another servant. I don't know. But it just so happens that fellow servant owes him, not chump change, I would say, but in my estimation, probably about a good $8,000 or $9,000.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. It's not too much, but compared to $4 quadrillion.
So let's put
nothing.
it this way: national debt versus cheap used car. How's that?
There you go.
There you go.
Exactly. And so what happens is that the first servant grabs him, chokes him, and says, pay me what you owe. And very curiously, the fellow servant falls down, pleads with him, and says,
be patient with me.
the same words the other guy did.
Right.
Have patience with me, and I will pay you. But the first servant refuses. He will not have patience. He will not have pity. And he throws this other guy in debtor's prison until he can be paid back.
Right.
Which is a weird thing, but used to happen. Now, the end part of this story is, of course, that the master, the king, finds out what this first servant has done, and he's incensed. He calls the guy before him and says, I forgave you all of that. Could you not forgive your fellow servant just a little? And then he has that first servant thrown into jail until he should pay all his debt. And Jesus says, so also my heavenly Father will do for every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart.
Ouch.
So here's that first option, right? Where we are offended and we dare to claim moral authority, moral superiority over someone else. The very first thing we're doing is forgetting how much we ourselves have been forgiven.
Jackpot.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. How much have we been forgiven? How much have you been forgiven? The wages of sin is death. Have you ever sinned? Once?
Yep.
You deserve death. Who took your death? God did. Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? How much do you owe Jesus? Everything. Who has the right to be offended by everything that comes out of your evil heart? Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And yet he stands between you and the judgment, and he says, I paid for that.
I paid. Yeah. Yeah. Not just that debt is forgiven, but I paid that debt.
Yep. I paid it.
An enormous debt. I mean, yeah. Boy, you just cannot undersell the stench of sin in God's nostrils.
Right.
That Jesus now covers up the sweet scent of forgiveness. And honestly, it's just so shocking to me that when we deal with the other people, the very first thing we do is forget that. We forget the enormity of that, and in refusing to forgive other people and refusing to have people on them, or for that matter, seeking to take offense by them, we show that we do not truly understand how much we've been forgiven by God.
It's interesting that as we see this rise of what's known as cancel culture, the idea that I should be perpetually offended by everyone else, and that those people should be penalized and punished and everything else. What's happened is we've become a much more unhealthy society. Emotionally, we've become very unhealthy. Suicide rates continue to climb. Depression, anxiety. I think I heard the other day that antidepressants are the number one prescribed medication now. We're becoming a culture of people who are sad, of people who are very discontented. And the Wall Street Journal recently had a survey. 12% of Americans said to be that they were very happy. And the Wall Street Journal said, what's different with this 12%? And they surveyed these 12% and went across Republican, Democrat, and independents all alike. And the number one thing is, I believe in God. I believe that there's something bigger than me. And
no kidding.
I believe that community is important also. They are not isolating themselves, which is what social media does to us. It isolates us, especially coming off the pandemic when we've been isolated. And we're becoming a suicidal country. We're becoming a physically, mentally, and spiritually sick place. And the more we drive God out of our culture, the more rapidly we're becoming completely sick in every way possible. And it comes down to what we're talking about today. There is something greater than me out there that is morally absolute, and I am not it. I'm not God, and I am not morally absolutely righteous in any way, shape, or form. I need a merciful God.
Yeah.
But in a country without a merciful God, we just end up with a merciless country.
Well, and behind all that, I think, is what the scriptures tell us. We love because God first loved us. So where do we get love? If we, as you said, we're getting depressed, we're getting sad, we're being constantly offended because we cannot love one another. And the reason is because we don't know that God first loved us.
Right.
And so when that disconnect comes, we indeed begin to be very depressed, very sad, very disappointed with everything. Whereas love covers a multitude of sins.
Yes.
And I think this should be our first reaction when someone, quote unquote, sins against us. Rather than shouting out, I'm offended, we can simply say, you know what, maybe they just had a bad day. Maybe they didn't mean it that way.
Right.
Maybe let's just sweep that under the rug, or, and just put the best construction on.
Or maybe it's an opportunity to actually engage with that person and say, what's going on in your life?
Okay.
Is there somehow I can help?
Sure.
Is there, do you need to talk to someone? I'm here for you.
Okay.
Instead of saying, oh, you're a rotten person, human being, and just turn on them. It's interesting to me also that this cancel culture is nothing new. And it has been alive and well for a long time, but also in the church.
Okay.
When we grew up in churches that were incredibly and wrongfully pious in a bad way, calling out various groups and treating individuals in groups like they were less than human. I think in particular, homosexuality, that the church has historically, conservative Christianity has historically treated homosexuals not as people who need Jesus, but as almost like people without a soul. And, those people, and then you just throw them out there. Or anyone that doesn't fit our mold. When I was a kid growing up, there were hippies. And hippies, they're dangerous, right? They do drugs and they're wild and all that. Instead of saying these are people for whom Christ died, and they need the gospel every bit as much as I do, and I need forgiveness every bit as much as they do. Instead, they're offensive to me, and they should go away. They should not be part of the church. They should not be forgiven.
So, two thoughts.
Yeah.
One, I think we should also do an entire episode on how the church responds to offense.
Yep.
Both real and perceived. And then also, two, as we turn back towards our own individual offense, that what you just said there, that cancel culture seeks to cut ourselves off from other people.
Yeah.
But the biblical model, as we learned last week, is God's own model, where he does not say, I cut you off, but I seek to be reconciled.
Yes.
And that's where we actually get the first part of Matthew chapter 18, right?
Right.
Now, in the first part of Matthew 18, there is this is what we call the Matthew 18 process, Matthew 18:15 and following, to where, and you talked about this last week, where if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. Now pause right there. That is the intention there, that we are seeking to be reconciled. Not to say, you hurt me and I'm offended, but you sinned against me and it's caused some distance between us. And I'd like to have that reconciled.
Right.
I'd like to be reconciled to you.
Yeah.
That is the intention. Not cut off, not canceled, not and certainly not cutting the quote unquote toxic people out of your life, but trying to be reconciled. And then there's a whole process that goes through that. So again, if you can't be reconciled there, you take the witnesses. If you can't be reconciled, then you take it to the elders, and then you take it to the church. And finally, when the other person has just completely declared that they will not be reconciled in any way, shape, or form, then we treat them as an outsider.
And this is the way of church discipline also,
Yes.
that when someone sins against the church, the ultimate goal is that they be reconciled, not that we purge them, not that we get rid of them, right? Not that we shove them out. Unfortunately, in our world as Lutherans, what has become very, very normal is that someone will publish something or say something in a public venue and it's wrong, perhaps right down heretical. Instead of engaging this person and saying, well, what did you mean by that? And, well, this is why I think you're incorrect on this. And let us sit down and reason together, like Isaiah 1:18. Instead, it's well, you made a public statement. Now I have to publicly rebuke you and go as far as to say, mark and avoid this person. Right? This person
Right,
is
yeah.
no longer one of us, and they should be purged and never heard from again and cast into the outer darkness. And that is not what God has in mind.
And again, that's something we should return back to next week, to that idea of the public sin and the public rebuke. And so thanks for bringing that up. But if we can return briefly in the few minutes we have left to this idea of our personal approach to when there is a genuine sin against us.
Yeah.
What should we desire? Well, if we're mindful of what God has given us, we should also be mindful of what we desire for others.
Right.
The love, again, we love because God first loved us. How did he love us? By reconciling us to himself through Christ's death on the cross.
Right.
So our love for one another also then demands, it informs, it directs us towards that idea that we will be reconciled to one another. And the way to be reconciled is confession and absolution. And that's what we're saying here in this Matthew 18, verses 15 and following, that if someone has sinned against me, my task is to go to them, in this particular case, to be able to say, Craig, you've sinned against me. And then for you to be able to say, oh gosh, I hadn't realized that. I'm sorry. Or maybe I did realize it, and I confess, and that was wrong. And I get to say, I forgive you.
I like how it's stated in Matthew 18:15. You go and tell him his faults between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. I love that. You have gained your brother. And that's what we want, is to have our brother back. We want to have there be nothing between us anymore. This is in some of the services before communion. There's this place where we do what we call the sharing of the peace, where we shake hands. New Testament model would be a kiss on the cheek. We don't do that because we're Americans. But but what this is, as we shake hands, we say, peace be with you. And what we're saying is, we are at peace with one another. There's nothing between you and me, and there's nothing holding us back from being one with God. We are united. You and I are united. Mm-hmm. Whatever there was between us, if there was ever anything, we have put it away and forgotten it, and God has forgotten our sins. And so now we are ready as one to come to the Lord's table and to be united with God.
Exactly.
Right?
Peace be with you. There's nothing
Yes.
that will prevent us from coming to the altar together.
Yeah.
Whereas, again, if you cannot, or rather will not, say that to someone else, you are saying there's something that so divides us that we cannot even commune together. And by the way, then you are the unmerciful servant.
Yeah. You should step away from the table and reconcile with your brother and then come together.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so we come together as one body for the body and blood of Christ.
So I think, once again, the biblical model of reconciling offense is just that, to reconcile. Well, first, it's to cover it, to paper over it, to dismiss it, to find reasons to say that's not quite so nearly as offensive as I want it to be. Then, if there is true offense, to reconcile in love through confession and absolution.
Very good.
Yeah.
So we are coming down to the end of yet another exciting half an hour of For You Radio. I want to invite you once again to visit 1517.org. Check out all the resources there. And if you have anything between you and a loved one, be at peace with them. Be willing to set it aside. And so we say, as we bid farewell for today, peace be with you. For You Radio is a 1517.org production. To listen to this radio broadcast and broadcasts like this one, I invite you to visit 1517.org. There you will also find many publications and free resources, including classes on Christian apologetics, church history, philosophy, and so much more. We are completely funded by generous donors like you. Would you consider making a generous gift to our work of spreading the gospel? Simply visit 1517.org.